You ever get one of those letters that just ruin your day before you even finish the first sentence? Yeah, that was me. I'm standing at my mailbox, coffee in one hand, flipping through the usual junk mail, coupons, local flyers, some ad about eco-friendly gutter cleaning, when I see it. A plain white envelope with that bold HOA logo on the corner. You know the one. It looks all official and slightly threatening, like it's about to ruin your weekend. So, I rip it open right there on the driveway, still half asleep, and I swear, the first line nearly made me choke on my coffee. Failure to comply will result in fines of $1,000 per day. $1,000 a day. I just stood there staring at it, thinking, there's no way this is real. I didn't rob a bank. I didn't burn down a clubhouse. What could possibly be worth $1,000 a day in fines? And then it hit me, oh no, this was about the shed. Now, before you judge, this wasn't some ugly, broken down shack. It was a small, decent-looking shed I built behind my fence. Nice paint, matching roof tiles, even a little window. It wasn't hurting anyone. I built it to store my lawn tools and maybe escape from life for a few minutes, like a mini man cave, you know? But apparently, the HOA saw it differently. I'm standing there reading the letter over and over, trying to make sense of it, when my neighbor, Dave, walks by with his dog. He's like, "Hey, man, you okay? You look like you just found out taxes doubled again." I wave the letter at him and go, "Bro, they're fining me $1,000 a day over my shed." Dave just whistles, shakes his head, and says, "Man, that's rough. My cousin's HOA fined him once for having the wrong shade of beige on his fence." Beige. There are like 50 shades of that color. Not helping, Dave. Not helping. Anyway, I take the letter inside and read it properly this time. Turns out, they claim my shed violates community standards because it's visible from the street and was not pre-approved by the architectural committee. Okay, let's pause here. Visible from the street? You'd have to lean over my fence, squint your eyes, and stand on one foot to even spot it. And not pre-approved? I literally sent them an email with a picture of the shed kit before I built it. They just never replied. So yeah, I'm confused. Then I get angry. Then I get that petty kind of energy where you start thinking, alright, if they want to play games, I can play too. But at that moment, I was mostly just sitting there at my kitchen table, staring at that stupid letter like it was some kind of bad movie script. Because here's the kicker, the letter wasn't even signed by a person. It just said, sincerely, the compliance department. Like it was written by a robot that feeds on frustration and HOA dues. I started pacing around my kitchen, muttering to myself like a crazy person. $1,000 a day? What do they think I'm doing, running a theme park back there? Then I called my friend Lisa, who's kind of the neighborhood gossip but also knows everything about HOA drama. I tell her what happened, and she goes, "Oh, you must have made Karen mad." Karen, the HOA president. Of course. The same woman who once tried to fine a guy for hanging a flag too low. I swear, she's like the final boss of suburban power trips. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about the shed. This was about control. And look, I'm not the kind of guy who likes confrontation. I'd rather grill some burgers and mind my business. But something about that letter, the arrogance, the tone, it just flipped a switch. I thought, nope. Not this time. So I grabbed my laptop, opened a new folder called Operation Shed Defense, and started digging. I pulled up the HOA bylaws, old emails, everything. If they were gonna come at me with failure to comply, I was gonna hit back with page 14, section 3, paragraph 2. But before I dove too deep, I sat back and laughed a little. Because honestly, if someone told me a year ago that a simple, harmless shed, would turn into $1,000 a day war, I'd have said they were nuts. Yet here I was, coffee gone cold, HOA letter on the counter, realizing this was just the beginning of something much bigger. And the craziest part? That $1,000 per day threat? Yeah, they weren't bluffing. Alright, so let's rewind a bit back to the so-called offense that kicked off this $1,000 a day nonsense. Picture this: sunny Saturday morning, birds chirping, me in full DIY mode with a Home Depot playlist blasting in the background. I'd finally decided to build that backyard shed I'd been planning for months. Nothing crazy, just a clean little spot to store my lawnmower, tools, and maybe, if I'm being honest, escape from my responsibilities once in a while. Now, I'm not one of those people who just start building random stuff without checking the rules. Nope. I read the HOA handbook front to back. Twice. I even emailed the HOA board a polite little note with my plan: the shed would be within property lines, below height limits, and painted to match the house. I attached a picture of the exact model from the catalog, hit send, and thought, cool, that's handled. Days go by. No response. A week passes. Still nothing. So I figure, no news is good news. I mean, it's a shed, not a swimming pool or a zoo. Fast forward 2 weekends later, I build the thing. Spent all Saturday out there sweating, measuring, leveling, hammering. When I finally finished, I stood back and admired it like I'd just constructed the Taj Mahal of backyard storage. Clean lines, matching trim, even a cute little solar light above the door. I was proud. Like, too proud. My neighbor, Dave, came over with a beer and said, "Bro, this looks professional. The HOA should thank you for making the neighborhood look better." Oh, Dave. If only you knew. A few days later, I find a piece of paper taped to my front door. It's a notice of violation. Apparently, my beautiful, perfectly legal shed was, get this, non-compliant with community visual standards. Visual standards? What does that even mean? Is there an official HOA scale for what counts as too visible? Because from where I stood, the shed was barely peeking above my fence. You'd need binoculars and bad intentions to even notice it. At first, I honestly thought it was a mix-up. Maybe the letter was meant for someone else, like that guy 3 houses down with the neon green garage door. So I called the HOA office and said, "Hey, I think there's been a mistake. I got this notice, but my shed's fully within guidelines." The lady on the phone had that customer service voice, you know, the one that sounds polite but carries deep judgment. She said, "Oh, I'll have the compliance committee review your case." Case. Like I was on trial for backyard crimes. 2 days later, another letter arrives. This one less friendly. It says, failure to remove or modify the structure will result in further disciplinary action. Now I'm thinking, okay, they're serious. But still, I didn't panic. I took pictures, printed my emails, and even drew a little sketch showing the exact distance from the fence. I sent it all to them with a short note that basically said, "See? Everything's good." And for a brief moment, I thought that would be the end of it. Until I got the next letter. This one didn't even bother pretending to be polite. It was bolded, underlined, and practically yelled at me through the paper. Final notice: remove unauthorized structure immediately or face daily fines. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about the shed anymore. The HOA had found their new target, me. I started noticing weird little things after that. The HOA president, Karen, walking her dog very slowly past my house every evening, pretending to check her phone but clearly snapping pictures. A couple of board members suddenly inspecting the cul-de-sac with clipboards. Even my trash can placement got comments in the next HOA newsletter. Coincidence? Yeah, right. It felt like I'd accidentally stepped into some suburban version of the Hunger Games, where the prize was least compliant homeowner of the month. The best part? When I tried to attend the next HOA meeting to talk about it, they said I'd need to schedule time on the agenda, which, conveniently, was full for the next 3 months. That's when I knew this was personal. See, I later found out from Lisa, our unofficial gossip reporter, that Karen had been on a visibility crusade. She wanted every backyard uniform and harmonious. Translation: she didn't like anything that didn't fit her version of perfect. So my shed, my harmless, well-built, color-matching shed, was basically her white whale. I could have torn it down. Could have said fine and moved on. But something about the way they handled it, the tone, the threats, the total lack of logic, just made me dig my heels in deeper. You don't threaten someone with $1,000 fine over a shed and expect them to roll over. Nah. That's when I decided I was going to fight back. Because if they wanted a war over 10 feet of painted wood and a roof, they were about to get one. If you've never been to an HOA board meeting, let me paint you a picture. Imagine a courtroom, a kindergarten classroom, and a bad reality show all rolled into one, and you're the poor soul stuck in the middle. I walked into the clubhouse that evening clutching my folder full of evidence, emails, measurements, photos of my totally innocent shed, ready to clear my name like some suburban defense attorney. The sign-in sheet was already half filled with names I recognized, mostly the same people who treat lawn height like a religion. And then, there she was. Karen. The HOA president. You know the type, perfectly pressed blazer, reading glasses hanging on a little pearl chain, smile so tight it could slice glass. She looked up at me like I was a cockroach that had just wandered onto her marble countertop. "Ah, Mr. Daniels," she said, dragging out my name like she was tasting something sour. "We've been expecting you." Great. Always a good sign when someone says that. I sat down at the long conference table. The other board members were already there, 3 of them, to be exact. First, there was Roger, the treasurer, who looked like he hadn't smiled since 2003. Then Marla, the secretary, who spent the entire time typing like she was live transcribing a trial. And finally, Tom, the architectural committee guy, basically the self-appointed ruler of anything that involved paint, fences, or, apparently, sheds. Karen cleared her throat. "We'll begin with item number 4 on the agenda, the matter of Mr. Daniels' unapproved structure." Yeah, I said, flipping open my folder. "About that. I actually emailed the committee before building it. Never got a response, so I assumed it was fine. I even made sure the color matched the house and..." Tom raised a hand like a traffic cop. "Assumed," he said, eyebrows climbing. "That's where you went wrong. You assumed." I bit back a laugh. "Okay, fair. But I did reach out. You guys just never replied." Karen leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Mr. Daniels, it's not our responsibility to chase down every homeowner's personal project. The rules clearly state written approval must be received before construction." "I mean, sure," I said, "but if no one responds for 3 weeks, what am I supposed to do? Grow old waiting for a stamp?" Roger snorted. "You could have waited. And you could have answered," I shot back before I could stop myself. That earned me the Karen death stare. You know the one, eyebrows arched, lips pursed, silent judgment radiating like Wi-Fi. Karen smiled that tight smile again. "We're not here to argue, Mr. Daniels. We're here to uphold community standards." Community standards. My new least favorite phrase. Marla chimed in without looking up from her laptop. "The structure in question is visible from multiple vantage points." "Yeah," I said, "if you stand on Dave's trampoline and lean over my fence." Roger grunted. "That's not the point. Visibility is visibility." At this point, I realized logic wasn't going to work here. These people weren't interested in fairness, they wanted obedience. Karen sighed dramatically, like I'd personally offended the spirit of the neighborhood. "Look, Mr. Daniels, we appreciate your enthusiasm for home improvement. But rules exist for a reason. If we allow one unapproved structure, what's next? Pink sheds? Chicken coops? Anarchy?" "Anarchy," I repeated. "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm planning. Total shed-based chaos." A couple of neighbors in the audience snickered, but Karen didn't find it funny. She straightened her papers and said, "If the shed isn't removed by the end of the week, we'll be forced to take legal action." That's when the mood in the room shifted. Legal action. It rolled off her tongue like a threat she'd been dying to use. I leaned back in my chair and said, "You're seriously threatening to sue me over a shed?" Karen just smiled. "We're simply enforcing compliance." Translation: yes, we absolutely are. I looked around the table, blank faces. No empathy, no reason. Just people who liked having power over things that didn't matter. That's when it hit me, this wasn't going to be a fair fight. They weren't defending rules, they were defending their control. I gathered my papers and stood up. "All right," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "If that's how it's gonna be, then I'll see you at the next meeting. But just so you know, I'm not taking that shed down." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Then you'll be leaving us no choice." I gave a small shrug. "Guess we'll find out who runs out of patience first." And with that, I walked out. The meeting kept going behind me. I could still hear Karen's voice echoing down the hallway, something about setting an example. But as I stepped into the cool night air, something in me shifted. This wasn't just about a shed anymore. It was about standing up to people who think they can bully you because they have a clipboard and a title. I looked back at that clubhouse one last time and thought, all right, HOA. You want a fight? You just got one. You know what's funny? Once you tick off an HOA, suddenly everyone's watching you, and not in a hey, nice lawn kind of way. The morning after that dreadful meeting, I stepped outside to grab the paper, and I swear, 3 blinds in 3 different houses snapped shut at the same time. Like synchronized judgment. Even the squirrels seemed quieter, like they knew something was up. At first, I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. But then, the whispers started. It began with Dave, my neighbor/grill buddy, walking over one evening holding 2 beers like a peace offering. He sat on my porch steps and said, "Man, I heard about that meeting. Karen was bragging at the dog park. Something about another one learning their lesson." "Another one?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, you're not the first. They fined Mrs. Patel last year because her mailbox was 2 inches too tall." 2 inches, bro. She had to replace the whole thing. 2 inches. I nearly choked on my drink. Then he leaned in a little closer, lowering his voice. "And remember the Johnsons? The couple that used to live on the corner lot? They got fined for having a tomato garden. HOA said it wasn't aesthetically consistent with the neighborhood. They moved out a month later." I just stared at him. "You're telling me they chased people out over vegetables?" He nodded. "Welcome to the dictatorship of driveways and shrubs, my friend." We both laughed, but there was this unspoken tension under it. Like, yeah, it was funny until it wasn't. Over the next few days, more stories started trickling in. People would casually bring it up when walking their dogs, like it was some neighborhood confessional. One woman, Sandra, told me they made her repaint her fence 3 times because the shade of white was too creamy. Another guy got written up because his kid's bike was left in the front yard overnight. Apparently, that disrupted the visual harmony. But the craziest part? None of this ever seemed to apply to certain people. Karen's house, for example. Her front porch has wind chimes, a bright blue welcome mat, and these big flower pots that technically violate the Uniform Decor Clause. But you think she got a letter? Nope. Roger, the treasurer guy, had a boat parked in his driveway for a week straight. No fine. But when old Mr. Harris down the street left his camper out for one afternoon, boom, $250 citation. A pattern started to form. Rules weren't rules. They were weapons. And the more I learned, the more it started to feel like we were all living in a suburban surveillance zone. See, there was also Nancy. Every neighborhood has a Nancy. She's that one person who somehow knows everyone's business before it even happens. Short haircut, always wearing workout clothes, but never actually seen working out. Nancy was the HOA's unofficial eyes and ears. I caught her once, standing on the sidewalk near my fence, holding her phone at a suspicious angle. I said, "Morning, Nancy. You filming a documentary or just spying on me again?" She smiled this fake smile and said, "Oh no, just taking photos for the community newsletter." Yeah, sure. If that newsletter ever gets published, I'll eat my shed. From then on, I started noticing her everywhere. When I mowed the lawn, she was there. When I took the trash out, she was there. I half expected her to start raiding my recycling bins. But it wasn't all bad. Not everyone was part of Karen's kingdom. There was one neighbor, Elena. She lived a couple streets over, quiet, kept to herself. One afternoon, she stopped me while I was checking my mail and said softly, "I saw what they're doing to you. It's wrong." She told me she'd once tried to fight them too, over solar panels. The HOA said they disrupted the neighborhood's aesthetic. She went through months of appeals before finally giving up. "They drain you," she said. "That's their tactic. They make you tired enough to stop fighting." Her words stuck with me. By the time I walked home, I realized this wasn't just my fight anymore. It was everyone's. People were scared to speak up, scared to get another letter, scared to become the next example. That's when I started keeping notes, names, dates, incidents. A little file I called HOA Pattern of Madness. Petty as it sounds, it gave me a weird sense of purpose. Like I wasn't just being targeted, I was documenting something bigger. But the longer this went on, the more I felt like I was being watched. Every time I stepped outside, I could feel eyes on me. When I mowed the lawn, I caught shadows moving behind blinds. When I walked my dog, I'd hear doors creak open, like people were checking if I was up to something. It stopped feeling like a neighborhood and started feeling like a movie set, where everyone's pretending to be friendly but secretly reporting back to HQ. The HOA had built a culture of fear, and I'd just become public enemy number one. But here's the thing about fear: once you've been embarrassed in front of a whole board, threatened with legal action, and fined over a shed, you kind of stop caring what anyone thinks. So yeah, they could watch me all they wanted. Because I was done hiding. And if they thought they could scare me into submission, well, they were about to learn that I'm a lot more stubborn than I look. You ever have one of those weeks where every single day just feels like a rerun of the same bad episode? That was my life after the board meeting. Same breakfast, same routine, and every morning, a new letter waiting in my mailbox like clockwork. At first, I thought it was just another warning. You know, standard HOA fluff, failure to comply, blah blah, community standards, but no, this was different. Each envelope had daily notice of violation printed across the top in bold red ink. And every one of them came with a time-stamped picture of my shed. Front, side, back, they were covering every possible angle like it was some kind of crime scene investigation. The first time I opened one, I laughed. The second time, I swore under my breath. By the fifth day, it wasn't funny anymore. The tone in the letters started changing. Less friendly reminder, more hostile countdown. If non-compliance continues, the HOA will pursue all remedies available, including property liens, legal costs, and further penalties. A lien. On my house. Over a shed. That line hit me like a punch. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, reading it out loud in disbelief, like maybe the words would change if I sounded them out differently. Property lien. Still the same. I could almost hear Karen's smug voice in my head, "Rules are rules, Mr. Daniels." I wish I could say I brushed it off, but I didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about worst-case scenarios. What if they actually tried to take me to court? What if they won? What if this thing started messing with my credit or my mortgage? I was angry, sure. But under that? I was scared. By day 10, my mailbox looked like a crime scene, envelopes piling up like little white threats. I half expected one to start ticking. Then, one morning, I noticed something new. A small HOA vehicle, one of those white maintenance trucks, slowly rolling past my house. Twice. Then again the next day. Sometimes, it would just idle across the street, the driver checking his phone. Other times, he'd step out and take photos. It felt less like a neighborhood and more like surveillance. I realized then, if they were documenting everything I did, I needed to do the same. So I started my own file. I took pictures of every letter, every notice, every timestamp. Recorded every phone call. Even filmed myself walking around the shed with a tape measure, proving it met every rule they claimed I broke. I backed everything up on 2 hard drives, one for me, one for just in case they somehow erased me from the planet. I turned my living room into a war room. Letters spread across the table, sticky notes, printed bylaws, even a whiteboard that read, "The HOA wants a fight." Fine. Let's fight. But even with all that, the stress was eating at me. I'd lie awake wondering if I'd missed something. What if there was a technicality? Some tiny line in the rules they could use against me? I reread the HOA handbook so many times I could practically quote it in my sleep. Meanwhile, the fines kept adding up. Every letter mentioned it like a countdown to doomsday. Current daily fine, $1,000. Total accumulated, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000. They were treating it like a parking ticket. I was treating it like a mortgage payment I never agreed to. One evening, I came home to find another letter taped to my door, this time marked Final Warning. The first line read, "Failure to remove the unauthorized structure within 5 days will result in legal escalation and potential seizure of property." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe how far this had gone. A shed. A shed. But laughter only lasted a few seconds before it turned into something heavier. I felt trapped. Like no matter what I did, they'd find another way to twist it. For the first time since this whole mess started, I thought about giving in. Just tearing it down, ending the nightmare. I even stood in the backyard, hammer in hand, staring at the shed like it was my enemy. But then I saw that little solar light above the door flicker on, the one I'd installed myself. And something inside me said, no. You built this fair and square. That was the moment I decided, if they were gonna try to bury me in paperwork, I'd bury them in evidence. So I doubled down. Set up cameras on my property. Logged every interaction with date and time. Even printed screenshots of my original emails to prove I'd followed procedure. If they wanted a war, I was going to make sure every shot was recorded. Because here's the thing about bullies, they thrive on silence. But once you start shining a light on their nonsense, they get real uncomfortable real fast. The $1,000 a day fine kept hanging over my head like a ticking bomb. But this time, I wasn't going to let fear win. They wanted compliance. I was giving them documentation. And soon enough, they were gonna wish they'd never sent that first letter. After 10 days of envelope hell and nightly panic spirals, I did what any mildly obsessive homeowner would do, I buried myself in the bylaws. Not the watered-down quick rules they hand out at move-in, I mean the real document, the chunky PDF that looks like it was written by someone who'd fallen asleep on a stack of legal textbooks. I printed the whole thing. Every single page. My kitchen table looked like a law library exploded. Coffee rings, sticky notes, highlighter stains, I was committed. If the HOA wanted to play the legal game, I was gonna learn the rules of that game better than they did. First pass, general stuff. Height limits, setback requirements, trash can schedules. Yawn. Nothing that screamed sue the neighbor over a shed. But then I started paying attention to the details, the small stuff that actually matters in legal land, signatures, dates, amendment procedures, and the way votes are recorded. And that's when the little holes started appearing. For starters, and this one's wild, the fine schedule the compliance department kept waving at me wasn't actually in the bylaws. It showed up in some newsletter from 2012, never ratified in a proper vote. Basically, it was being treated like gospel, but there was no official record of the community ever approving it. No minutes, no signatures, just a PDF someone uploaded to the HOA site and then acted like law. Then there were the meeting minutes. A lot of things in the bylaws required a quorum for decisions and a recorded vote. Quorum. Remember that word. I started pulling minutes from the months when the committee had supposedly voted on enforcement procedures. Half the pages were missing. A few meetings had adjourned times that made no sense. Some votes were listed as unanimous, but only 3 people signed the sheet when the board actually had 7 members. Missing signatures, missing notice periods, procedural steps skipped like someone had built a Lego tower and left out a few pieces. There were also notice requirements. The bylaws said any enforcement action needed a written notice delivered in a specific way, and the homeowner had to be given a certain number of days to respond before fines could be levied. I checked my letters. The first notice I got was a single slip taped to my door. No certified mail. No documented attempt at a sit-down hearing. Nothing that matched the process they were supposed to follow. I found a clause about architectural approvals that was pretty clear. If the committee fails to respond within 30 days of a written request, the homeowner can proceed unless an extension was formally requested in writing. Guess how many times I'd emailed them with a picture? Yep. 30 days came and went. No extension. No response. Technically, that made my build conditionally okay. I nearly choked on my coffee when I read this part. I mean, talk about a plot twist. It felt like someone telling me the referee had fallen asleep and the game was still on. But it wasn't just procedural missteps. Some rules referenced sections that didn't exist anymore, outdated clauses never updated after the last association amendment. A couple of enforcement policies mentioned fines capped at amounts far lower than the $1,000 per day they were slapping on my mailbox. And get this, the document that supposedly gave the compliance department its sweeping powers? No signature. No date. Just a scanned page with a stamp that looked like it came from a printer in 2009. By the time I hit page 92, I was grinning like a lunatic. Not because I'd figured out how to dodge responsibility, but because I'd found the chinks in their armor. Every time they pointed a finger, I could point to a missing step, an absent signature, or a rule they'd invented after the fact. That night I did something petty and satisfying. I made copies of all the suspicious pages, stamped them evidence, and slid them into a new folder labeled HOA Procedural Failures. Felt official. Felt good. And with that folder came a change in me. Before, the letters had made me small, anxious, defensive, convinced I was the problem. Now, armed with dates and clauses, I felt steady. Knowledge has this neat trick: it takes the breath out of fear. Rules don't scare you when you can read them better than the people who pretend to enforce them. I started drafting emails that weren't angry rants but precise, clip notes, per Article X, Section Y, your notice lacked required delivery method, and our records show no ratified fine schedule matching the amount you claim. I CC'd the board. I requested certified confirmation of votes, signed minutes, and the names of committee members who had actually authorized the fines. Most importantly, I stopped reacting and started requesting. If they wanted to play by rules, great, I would too. I'd follow every box on the form, file every appeal, and demand that they do the same. If they wanted to weaponize rules, I'd weaponize the rules back: process, procedure, and proof. It felt like flipping a switch. Fear turned into strategy. Panic turned into paperwork. And somewhere under all the dusty legalese, a plan was forming. So I drank another coffee, closed my laptop, and smiled. If they want to play by the rules, I wrote in big letters on a sticky note and slapped it to my monitor, I'll show them what the rules really say. And for the first time since that first $1,000 a day letter, I slept without imagining a lien on my house. Alright, this is where the fun begins. After a week of legal spelunking and printing things until my printer politely asked for a break, I decided to stop pacing and start punching back. Not with fists. With paperwork. Which, honestly, feels almost as satisfying. First thing I did was assemble my masterpiece, a formal dispute packet. I know, masterpiece is dramatic. But hear me out. It had everything: photocopies of my original emails asking for approval, timestamps, photos showing the shed's placement, and the exact bylaw citations I'd scavenged like a nerdy treasure hunter. Article 4, Section 3 on architectural approvals, Article 7, Section 2 on notice procedures, and the little nugget that said fines required a ratified vote and recorded minutes. I even highlighted the parts where the HOA had to use certified mail for official notices. Felt like I was building a tiny legal fort. Then I wrote the letter. Short, precise, and not passive-aggressive at all. It read something like, per Article 4, Section 3 and Article 7, Section 2, please provide certified proof of 1. Ratification of the $1,000 per day fine schedule, 2. Documented quorum and vote authorizing these fines, and 3. Certified delivery of the initial notice. I request a hearing within the timeline specified in the bylaws. Kindly respond within 10 business days. I may have thrown in a polite thanks at the end because I'm not a monster. I sent it certified. With return receipt. I watched the carrier's little tracking number like it was a suspense thriller. Then I sent copies to the board members individually, CCING the property management company, and because I'm petty and proud, I also sent one to Karen's listed HOA email. Then I waited. Mostly to see how long it would take them to start sweating. What I didn't expect was how fast they'd fumble. A week passed. Then 2 days later, I get a reply, not to my certified letter, mind you, but a curt email from Marla saying they'd received my concerns and that the board would review at the next meeting. No attachments. No minutes. No receipts. No signatures. It was the administrative equivalent of someone shrugging at you from across a crowded room. So I escalated. I demanded copies of the minutes where the fine schedule was supposedly ratified. I asked for proof of quorum. I requested the compliance committee's membership roster and the signed authorization for enforcement actions. Certified again. Because habits die hard. That's when things started to wobble. At the next in-person meeting, which I attended armed with copies of my packet and a calm face, I watched Karen and the board shuffle papers like kids trying to hide a report card. There was a nervousness I hadn't noticed before. Roger kept checking his phone. Tom's jaw clicked. Marla typed so fast her keyboard might have caught fire. I asked my questions out loud. Can you show the record of the vote that approved the $1,000 fine schedule? Silence. Can you produce certified delivery proof for the initial notice? More silence, but this time with sweating. One of the board members, a guy named Elliot who'd always seemed harmless, finally muttered, "We're looking into it." Which, translated from HOA to human, means, we don't have it. A board member clearing their throat isn't dramatic on TV. In person it's like watching a balloon lose air. They tried to regain control by reading a prepared statement about protecting property values and consistent enforcement. But the sheen was off. Their words had the same credibility as a $3 umbrella in a monsoon. The best part? The homeowners in that room were watching. A few heads tilted. A couple of neighbors exchanged glances. Elena, the quiet one who had warned me before, gave me a tiny thumbs up from the back. That little gesture felt like a victory flag. Over the next week, I got 2 things from the HOA, a formal request for additional documentation, which, sure, I gave them, and more importantly, a certified letter asking me to attend a hearing with a blank space where the evidence of violation should have been attached. They'd sent the letter, but not the evidence. Classic. You could see the chess pieces moving. The board was scrambling to retroactively manufacture a paper trail. They were trying to fix process by inventing it. Spoiler, that's not how rules work. By then, I'd already started posting redacted copies of the certified responses on the neighborhood forum, nothing libelous, just factual, requested minutes not provided. The chatter shifted. People who'd been silent for months started asking questions. Nancy the spy curiously stopped her daily patrols. Dave stopped making jokes and started bringing me coffee like a co-conspirator. Walking away from that meeting, I felt something sweet, momentum. For the first time since this started, the power in the room didn't feel like it was all on one side. They'd expected me to curl up and comply. Instead, I forced transparency, one certified letter at a time. And when institutions hide paper trails, exposing the gaps is half the battle. So yeah, call it revenge, call it righteous paperwork. I call it justice with receipts. And if you're wondering whether I enjoyed watching them lose their swagger? Guilty as charged. I didn't plan on starting a neighborhood revolution, I just wanted to keep my shed. But man, once the truth started leaking out, it spread faster than HOA gossip at a yard sale. It started small. One of my neighbors, Steve, the quiet guy who always mows his lawn in perfect diagonal lines, stopped me one morning and said, "Hey, I saw your post about the missing boat records. You know, they fined me last year for a fence height violation, even though it matched the one next door." Then Mrs. Patel from 2 houses down chimed in, "They fined me for having my recycling bin out 1 hour early." 1 hour. And Karen sent me pictures she took from her car like some kind of trash bin paparazzi. It was like the floodgates opened. Every conversation at the mailbox turned into a therapy session. Everyone had a story, and every story ended with, "But I didn't fight it because I didn't think I could." That's when I realized something big: this wasn't just my battle. The whole neighborhood had been bullied into silence. So, I decided to do something about it. I posted a simple message on the neighborhood forum. "If you've ever been fined unfairly or threatened by the HOA, come by my driveway Saturday afternoon. Bring your letters. Let's compare notes." I figured maybe 3 or 4 people would show up. I even set out 6 folding chairs and a cooler with sodas just in case. By 3 p.m., there were more than 20 people standing in a circle, holding folders, envelopes, and a whole lot of pent-up frustration. Steve brought a binder labeled "Fence Nonsense." Mrs. Patel had a whole Ziploc bag full of old HOA letters. And Old Man Greg, the neighborhood's unofficial historian, showed up with a 3-inch thick folder and said, "They've been pulling this for years. I've got proof." It felt surreal, like a courtroom and a support group rolled into one. We started comparing letters, and sure enough, a pattern jumped out. The violations were different, but the signatures were the same. The language was the same. And get this, half the letters had no official approval stamp or date. Some weren't even signed. That's when Lisa, who works in accounting, looked at one of the fee schedules and said, "Wait a minute, these fines aren't even listed in the annual budget. That means they're collecting money that isn't properly recorded." The crowd went quiet. You could feel the shift, that moment where confusion turns into anger. People started pulling out their phones, snapping pictures, texting each other screenshots. It wasn't just frustration anymore, it was teamwork. We were building a case together. Word spread fast. By the next day, the forum was on fire. Threads titled "Unapproved Fines" and "Are We Being Overcharged?" popped up left and right. Even the people who never said a word started chiming in. And of course, Karen tried to shut it down with a comment like, "Please refrain from spreading misinformation about the HOA." That didn't go well for her. Someone replied, "Then maybe you should show us the minutes of the meetings where you approved these fines." Another added, "Funny how you enforce rules that don't exist." And just like that, Karen's empire started to wobble. A few days later, I got an anonymous email from someone using a burner address. They're panicking. Some board members are talking about resigning. I didn't know who sent it, but it made sense. The board wasn't as unified as it looked. At the last meeting, Roger barely spoke, Marla kept her eyes glued to her laptop, and Tom, the tough guy of the group, was suddenly way too polite. The tension was thick. Homeowners showed up in record numbers. Instead of the usual 5 bored people half listening, there were 50 angry ones, with printouts, notes, and questions. Lots of questions. Karen opened the meeting with her usual "let's maintain order," but it was already too late. Greg stood up and demanded to know where the fine money had gone. Lisa asked about the unrecorded votes. Steve straight up asked if the board was using fines to fund pet projects. For the first time, Karen didn't have that smug smirk. Her voice actually trembled a little when she said, "All financials are handled according to policy." Yeah, sure, what policy? That meeting ended in chaos. People were talking over each other, waving letters in the air, and demanding transparency. One of the board members even walked out halfway through, muttering something about not signing up for this mess. I walked home that night feeling something I hadn't felt in months: hope. Not just for me, but for everyone who'd been too scared to speak up before. The HOA had ruled through silence and intimidation. But now, the silence was broken. The neighbors weren't whispering anymore, they were organizing. And as for me, I was just getting started. Because if the board thought one guy with a shed was a problem, wait till they saw a neighborhood with receipts. I'll be honest, by the time the emergency HOA meeting rolled around, I wasn't even nervous anymore. I'd gone through denial, frustration, rage, and petty revenge phases. Now, I was in full Zen mode. Calm. Focused. The kind of calm you get when you already know how the movie ends. The notice for the meeting came in with the usual flair, big bold letters. Mandatory attendance required, community compliance dispute resolution. Classic Karen wording. It sounded more like a court summons than a neighborhood meeting. I could practically hear her typing it with righteous fury. But this time, I came prepared. Binder in hand, printed tabs, highlighted sections, the works. I even wore my lucky polo shirt, mostly because it made me look deceptively reasonable. When I walked into the clubhouse, the room was packed. Every seat was taken. People lined the walls, some holding folders, others just curious to see how this all would play out. I spotted Karen at the front, sitting in her usual power pose, arms crossed, chin tilted up, that little smirk she wore when she thought she was winning. To her right sat Roger, pretending to read through papers. Marla had a laptop open, tapping nervously. And then, surprise twist, next to them was a man in a suit. Not one of the regulars. I leaned toward Steve and whispered, "You think that's a lawyer?" Steve nodded. Looks like they finally lawyered up. Good, I thought. So did I. Karen called the meeting to order. Her tone was calm, too calm. We're here to address ongoing non-compliance issues with one homeowner regarding unapproved construction. We'd like to resolve this matter amicably. Amicably, she said, after threatening me with $1,000 a day fines. Sure. She started rehashing the violation. Something about the shed being visible, not pre-approved, violating community uniformity. It was the same speech from months ago, like she'd hit copy and paste on her last email. When she was done, she leaned back with that same smug half-smile. Would you like to respond? I smiled right back. Gladly. I walked up to the front table and placed my binder on the podium. First, I said, flipping it open, this is the original email I sent for approval, dated 2 months before construction. No response received. I slid a printed copy forward. Second, per Article 4, Section 3 of the HOA bylaws, any request not acted upon within 30 days is considered automatically approved. A murmur rippled through the room. Karen blinked. I wasn't done. Next, I continued, this is the certified mail receipt of your fine notice. You sent it on June 3rd, but the vote authorizing the new fine schedule wasn't recorded until July 15th, as seen here in your own meeting minutes. I flipped the page. Another document. Another timestamp. That means the $1,000 per day fine wasn't even valid when you issued it. Marla's typing slowed. Roger looked up from his papers, pale. And just for fun, I said, turning another tab, here's a copy of your official budget filing with the state. No record of fine income for the past fiscal year, despite multiple homeowners being charged. Which means either you didn't collect it, or you did, and didn't report it. That one landed like a grenade. You could hear the tension snap in the air. A few gasps. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Karen's face went red. That's irrelevant to your case," she stammered. Actually, came a new voice, the man in the suit. He adjusted his glasses, looked at her, then at me. It's very relevant. If these documents are accurate, these fines were issued without proper authorization or legal standing. You could have heard a pin drop. He turned to the board. I strongly recommend the association halt any enforcement actions immediately until compliance procedures are reviewed. Continuing would expose the HOA to liability. Liability. The magic word. Karen's confidence cracked right there. Her jaw tightened, her hand gripping her pen like she wanted to snap it in half. We'll need to review these materials, she said finally. The room erupted. Homeowners started clapping, some politely, others loud and proud. Steve gave me a thumbs up from the back. Mrs. Patel muttered something about karma working overtime. Even Greg smiled like a man who'd waited years to see justice done. The suit stood, collected his papers, and gave me a nod. Thank you for your thorough documentation, he said. You've done what most homeowners don't, held the board accountable to its own rules. That hit different. Karen tried to regain control, slamming her gavel down. Meeting adjourned, she barked. But it was too late. The authority she clung to evaporated. As people filtered out, a few neighbors came up to me, patting my shoulder, thanking me. One woman even said, "You just saved us all a lot of money." And as for the fines? 2 days later, I got an official letter in the mail. Same HOA logo, same white envelope. Only this time, it read, "Upon further review, your case has been closed. The fines have been rescinded. We apologize for any inconvenience." Inconvenience. That's what they called it. But I didn't care. Because I'd won. Not just for me, but for everyone they tried to intimidate. Standing on my porch that evening, watching the sun dip over my totally legal shed, I just smiled. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't breaking the rules. It's mastering them better than the people who wrote them. You ever feel the air in your neighborhood change? Like one day, everything's tense and quiet, and the next, it's lighter, almost peaceful? Yeah, that's what it felt like the week after the showdown. The HOA, once so loud and bossy, suddenly went radio silent. No new letters. No warnings. No friendly reminders about my trash cans or requests to move my mailbox 2 inches to the left. Just silence. Then, on the 5th day, I got another letter. Same envelope, same logo, but this one felt different. For one thing, it didn't come certified. For another, the return address had a new name at the bottom. I opened it cautiously, like it might still bite me. Inside was a single page. After review by the association's Legal Counsel and Compliance Committee, it has been determined that the enforcement actions taken regarding your property were not in accordance with HOA procedures. The fines have been rescinded. We apologize for the inconvenience and any distress caused. There it was, black and white. An apology. From the same people who once acted like I'd committed a crime against suburban harmony. I actually laughed. Out loud. Then I read it again, slower, just to savor it. And the cherry on top? The letter wasn't signed by Karen. Apparently, she'd stepped down from her position for personal reasons. Translation: she'd been quietly shoved out before things got uglier. Word around the neighborhood was that Roger and Marla followed not long after. A clean sweep, someone called it. The new interim president was a guy named Dennis, calm, reasonable, and already talking about rebuilding trust. He even came by one evening, holding a clipboard and a sheepish smile. "Hey," he said, "just wanted to thank you for, how you handled all that. You did the community a favor." That line hit me. For months, I'd been painted as the troublemaker. Now, suddenly I was the guy who'd stood up for everyone. It didn't take long for the neighborhood to reflect that change. People waved more. Stopped by to chat. Mrs. Patel dropped off cookies and said, "You made them realize they can't bully people anymore." Steve finally took down that ugly privacy tarp he'd put up out of fear of being non-compliant. Even Greg, the retired veteran who'd kept to himself for years, came out during one of my evening walks and saluted me with his coffee mug. "Good fight, soldier," he said. The spy neighbor, though? Oh, she didn't fare as well. Remember Nancy, the one who used to take pictures and email reports to Karen? Yeah. After the meeting, everyone found out. Turns out Karen had copied her on several confidential board messages that got leaked. Let's just say Nancy's morning patrol stopped real quick. One morning I caught her trying to quietly sneak her phone out for one last inspection down the street. Steve saw her too, and just shouted, "Hey Nancy, you missed a spot." The whole block laughed. She turned red and went back inside. After that, she mostly stayed invisible, poetic justice in action. And me? I didn't throw a party or anything dramatic. My celebration was simple, quiet. I walked out to my shed one weekend, repainted the door a fresh shade of blue, and planted a small tree beside it. A maple. Strong roots, slow growth, impossible to intimidate. As I stood there watering it, I realized something: it wasn't just about beating the HOA. It was about reclaiming peace. For months, my own home had felt like a battlefield. Every letter, every notice, every threat had turned this little piece of earth into something heavy. But now, with the sun setting behind the fence and that new tree swaying in the breeze, it finally felt like mine again. Later that evening, I found another note on my porch. Handwritten this time. Thanks for standing up when the rest of us didn't know how. The neighborhood. No signatures. Just a folded piece of paper and a lot of gratitude packed into one sentence. I tucked it inside my binder, the same one I used to fight the HOA, and placed it on a shelf in my shed. A trophy, in its own way. Looking back now, the whole saga almost feels unreal. All that over a shed. But it wasn't really about the shed, was it? It was about control. About people forgetting that community isn't supposed to mean follow me or pay up. The HOA thought they could fine me into submission. Instead, they reminded me that power only works if you let it. So yeah, the shed's still standing. The fines are gone. The bullies have left the building. And every time I water that little maple tree, I think to myself. They told me to comply. I chose to grow. If you've made it this far in the story, you probably already guessed the biggest lesson: never assume the people in charge are always right, especially when they're holding a clipboard and quoting policy. Looking back now, it's wild to think all this chaos started with a simple shed. But the truth is, it was never about the shed. It was about standing up to a system that counted on people not fighting back. See, HOAs thrive on silence. They send fancy letters, drop words like non-compliance and penalty schedule, and most homeowners just fold. They pay the fine or take down whatever offense they've been accused of, even if it makes no sense. I almost did too. I mean, who wants to go toe-to-toe with a bunch of rule-wielding board members who meet twice a month and think they're the FBI? But the thing is, I learned that most of their power isn't real. It's assumed. Once you start reading the fine print, asking for records, and citing their own bylaws back to them, the entire facade starts to crumble. And that's lesson number 1, know your rights. Every HOA is bound by state laws and its own governing documents, bylaws, CC&RS, covenants, conditions and restrictions, and state homeowner protection statutes. They can't just invent rules out of thin air. They can't issue unlimited fines without a due process hearing, proper documentation, and in most cases, a recorded vote. So if your HOA ever sends you a letter threatening immediate fines, ask for proof. Request meeting minutes, the enforcement policy, the fine schedule approval date. Make them show you the paper trail. If they don't have one, they've got nothing. Lesson number 2, document everything. I can't stress that enough. Emails, photos, timestamps, certified mail receipts, all of it. It's not about being paranoid, it's about being prepared. Paperwork is your shield when someone tries to twist the rules. I treated my inbox like a courtroom exhibit. Every message was another brick in the wall I built between me and their nonsense. And when they tried to bluff with "we'll take legal action," I already had the receipts, literally. Lesson number 3, never back down blindly. There's a difference between being stubborn and being smart. Don't go full keyboard warrior on your HOA just for fun, but don't let intimidation win either. There's a quiet kind of power in saying, I understand the rules, and you're breaking them. And trust me, the moment they realize you actually read the rulebook, they start sweating faster than a politician in a lie detector test. Another thing I learned, and this one's important, is that most states have homeowner protection laws. Some require that fines be reasonable and proportionate. Others demand that homeowners get a hearing before any fine becomes enforceable. In some states, like California and Texas, HOAs can't even place a lien for fines unless a court signs off on it. So yeah, those $1000 per day threats? Usually bluff and bluster. But it's not just about legal rights, it's about mindset. For months, I let those letters control my emotions. I lost sleep. I second-guessed myself. I almost tore down something I built with my own hands just to make them stop. But now, I see it clearly, they weren't defending the community, they were defending their control. And the day I realized that, everything shifted. Because once you stop being scared, they lose their grip. So if you're watching this and dealing with an HOA nightmare, that one board member who thinks they own the whole block, or the committee that finds you for aesthetic inconsistencies, remember this: you're not powerless. Learn the bylaws. Print the laws. Keep receipts. And when in doubt, bring facts, not fury. It's hard for bullies to argue with documentation. And yeah, it might sound cheesy, but I'll say it anyway: what they really taught me wasn't about compliance or landscaping or community standards. They taught me that knowledge is the best defense. They tried to fine me $1,000 a day, but what they really did was remind me that knowing your rights can turn even the smallest homeowner into the biggest problem for people who abuse power. And now, every time I look at that shed, my $1,000 a day crime scene, I just laugh. Because it stands as a reminder that the rules only matter when they're fair, and authority only matters when it's earned. So yeah, I didn't just build a shed. I built a statement. And the statement is simple: you can't find common sense.